Herzlich willkommen, bienvenue, benvenuti. Welcome to this media conference at ETH Zurich. I couldn't be more excited to welcome you all here, all you at the ETH Dome, but also all of you at home, hopefully all around the world. And I'm so excited about it because actually it doesn't even matter where we are right now. And no matter where we are from, no matter how we look like, no matter what we do or say, there's one big thing that we all have in common, and that's our origin. And from now on, we're gonna come closer and closer to the big, big answer of the, at least in my opinion, most exciting questions on Earth about our origin, the origin of life. Because today, the new Center for Origin and Prevalence of Life opened its doors at ETH Zurich. And in the next 40 minutes, we're gonna explain you all what we know for now, at least about it. Not me, for sure, much more important persons. So this is gonna be our program. First, our president, the president of ETH Zurich, Joel Meso, gonna tell you why we need this center. And actually not just us here at ETH, but the whole world. Then, our Nobel Prize winner, ETH professor Didier Queloz, gonna explain us the main research areas and also the structure, the budget, everything about the new center. After this, our professor Caramagna Bosco, who is just 33 years old and also in the management team of this of this center, gonna explain her research at this center, which is about life in really difficult, strange conditions. And she's gonna explain also why this center is gonna improve her research and bring her further to her answers she wanna know. After this, also an ETH professor and also in the leading team of the center, Sascha Quantz, gonna explain you about his research, and his research is about life beyond our solar system. And I can tell you, just a few days ago, he told me that actually he by himself is pretty sure that we will find life outside of the Earth during his lifetime, and he's 43. So I'm really excited about his speech later. I'm really looking forward to it. After the talks, we're gonna make an open Q&A session with all of you in here, but also all of you at home, wherever you are. The journalists here can ask their questions just directly. One person's gonna give a microphone, and you at home who are watching our live stream can just ask your question actually during the whole event in the live chat, and then Roman, the referent of Joel Meso, gonna ask them in the end. I think I forgot to say who I am. I'm so sorry. My name is Anne Malzev. I'm a spokesperson of ETH Zurich, the less important person in here, but I'm really happy to make the introduction for you. And now the real stuff begins. So I'm so happy to welcome you, Joel Meso, on this stage and explain us why we all need this center. Thank you very much.
An applause, right? So, thank you, Anna. But Anna, everyone is equal at ETH, and it's important, okay? Well, I mean, you see the kind of emotion that this initiative creates inside of ETH, and I think it's the same outside of ETH. And so thank you so much for the presentation. So I welcome here all the media representatives to ETH. This is a great moment when we open a new center. This doesn't happen very often. Let me just say a few words, maybe, you know, the mission of ETH is very simple. I can formulate it. By the way, you forgot one language, bienvenido. So the mission of ETH is very simple. We are here to serve society, point. And we should repeat this message again and again and again. This is why ETH was founded. Now we do that, let's simplify in 3 ways. First, we educate young people, and they go to society, they work in industry or for governments or different entities. This is our biggest impact. The second, we do research at a level that allows our society to progress. We address the grand challenges. You know, I don't need to mention how many we have now. It's really a time of crisis, and we are here really to provide solutions. And the third one is all the know-how transfer that we organize through different ways. Through the dialogue with you, for example, this is also some kind of know-how transfer. But there is something, and maybe on the startups that we create, this is what we communicate most. So, 25 startups every year in average from ETH. What is most impressive in the last years, 600 million venture capital in the startups of ETH. The ETH domain together, it's 1 billion. It's mainly located around EPFL and ETH Zurich. It's 1/3 of the total for Switzerland. So that's quite significant. Now, what we communicate less about, but this is essential to our core mission, is what we do in basic research. Basic research is the fuel for everything else that comes. It allows really to, actually, it's an interesting, we had yesterday an event around the Nobel Prize of Einstein, 100 years. And several people who have intervened said, actually, the biggest successes in terms of startups, know-how creation, comes from basic research. And we have a ton of examples that we could give here. And this is why we invest always in this basic fundamental research. And another point that we have to mention, this is an attractor. When we do great projects like this one on origin and prevalence of life, this attracts the best researchers, that's one point, but also the best students. That's why they want to come to ETH, to universities. And how do we do that? So, ETH, we have 16 departments. And these 16 departments are very important because they allow the education of our students to go very deep, to become experts, at least in one field. And you need this before you go transversal and then join with other kind of fields. Without this first step, it's very difficult to understand what the other fields are doing. And this is why we have this structure. Now we know, and I have experienced this myself in my research, very often the breakthrough comes at the boundary between disciplines. And this is what we are trying to do with our centers. I just give you an example, or two maybe. Personalized medicine, this is something that is everywhere. If you don't have AI or big access to data and so on, so the computer science part, we will not be able to move. And we have examples in that field. So that's one example of this multidisciplinary approach. Another example I like to give is MRI, magnetic resonance imaging, that is in every hospital. If you think where it comes from, it's 70, 80 years ago that researchers looking at the internal structure of atoms wanted to better understand the internal structure, and so they developed this NMR technique. And why I mention this, because there were a few Nobel Prize winners from ETH on the way, Wüthrich and Ernst, for example, but also Bloch, who was a student at ETH, who got the Nobel Prize when he was in US. And that led at the end, and they were in different departments. It started with physics, it went to chemistry, biology, and at the end you have these apparatures. So, so with this center, this is exactly what we want to do, and our colleagues will explain the value of interdisciplinarity in a minute. And I just want to mention that we run a number of such centers at ETH, where there is a component that is educational. Maybe you will talk about this also. And the Center for Origin and Prevalence of Life is the latest addition to our centers. Maybe a personal note, how did we get there? Okay, when you come as new president to to ETH. So that was for me in 19. The first thing I did, and you remember, I visited all departments. And I remember a lot of information. You received 16 departments, everyone want to place. But something struck really was clear. 4 or 5 departments were presenting ideas on the origin of life. And then they had already a small project that they had put together. I asked them to develop further because I was fascinated by what was presented. And then the second point was when we were at, about a few months later, we were at the WEF in Davos, and then Didier Queloz wanted to talk to me. And so, of course, we had foreseen, I think, half an hour. We spent 2 hours together because he presented a very similar idea. And then I opened my laptop, I looked for the document that ETH has prepared, and then we realized, wow, it's similar. Why don't we go away together? Cambridge, ETH, there were conferences organized, and then here we are now, today. And of course, you will see the passion of DJ when he talks about his dreams. It's contaminating. And today, with the launch of the center, about 40 professors or groups are already part of this. I mean, which is, you see the dimension that it has taken. And so we will hear a few of you. And we are intending to add some additional professorship. So we'll do that through a fundraising campaign, also through means from the Confederation. And I want to use this opportunity to congratulate all the colleagues who have worked very hard to get to this point. I want also to thank the Nomis Foundation and Markus Reinhardt and Ruben Garcia for your involvement. Actually, you contacted us that you wanted to be involved in this. I mean, this is a fantastic move that you did. We are so excited to have you on board. There will be a fellowship program that will be financed through the support of the Nomis Foundation. I must say we have great collaboration with the Nomis Foundation. And I see you here as the first mover, and I'm sure we will attract additional. Now, I'm convinced that this center is an essential piece that allows us to fulfill the mission that I mentioned at the beginning. And we don't do that only for ETH, we do that for Switzerland and worldwide. So we are already starting to look for partnership. For example, I can mention University of Zurich is very much interested, but I know that other Bern and other universities, Geneva, will also be partner at a later stage. We need to start at ETH, and then also international. There are a few such initiatives internationally. Now, what can we promise with this? Well, Sasha, you already said we will. I always say, the way, der Weg, the way is as important as the goal. I'll try to explain. Through the technologies, through the methods that we develop to get to the goal, there are always some startups, some products that can be useful for other fields. And that's something that we see again and again and again. Imagine they develop a sensor to look at maybe some atmosphere in some planet. I mean, this sensor will be of such a high quality that probably at some point it will finish in our iPhone. So this is what we observe. We see that. And we have to talk more about this. So I want to stop here. I'm very excited about this initiative. I'm very excited by the way you gathered together and really carried this effort. And now I'm looking forward to your presentation. And I don't know, Anna, I give you back the word, or how does it go? Straight. So, DJ, you have the word. Thank you.
Thank you, Joël. Well, to start the meat of the discussion here, I would like to invite you to think about two short questions. Why life emerge on Earth? Is the universe full of life? These are very simple questions, but I guess you would agree that these are one of the greatest existential questions you may think asking. Well, the raison d'être of this center is essentially to take up the challenge and to advance our knowledge on these fascinating topics. You already saw the enthusiasm that without doing anything, we're already triggering. So it gives a little bit of a hint what is coming ahead of us. Why now? Why a center? So we're living, I believe, an extraordinary moment in our history where a couple of spectacular scientific breakthroughs are bringing us, let's call it an optimistic perspective that modern science is within reach to deliver partial answer about why do we have life on Earth? Is that unique? Astrophysics is detecting, as you know, plenty, and more than detecting, they also characterize planets almost on every stars around. Planetary scientists are exploring the solar system. This famous ongoing Mars experiment, we get a lot of beautiful picture. They even will bring back sample, which is really a big step forwards for us. Organic biochemistry have recently made spectacular progress on what I would call reverse engineering of life. They try to bring back the life at the origin and to demonstrate how you can make it. So all this together is absolutely new. I mean, if you go back 20 years ago, it didn't exist. Well, actually, interestingly, reviewing all these recent achievements and spectacular successes in each of these disciplines I was mentioning is or was, because almost the end, the topic of a symposium this week, organized by my colleagues. I think that was quite fascinating to see all this great result that has been presented. And it's still this afternoon, so I invite you to stay in the afternoon if you want to see the last chapter, which is about planet and other star. But when you look at these results and you realize that a lot of these individual progresses in each of these disciplines actually does not guarantee that we're going to solve the core problem. A growing number of scientists working at the forefront of these various fields start to think a bit differently, and in a way they're getting increasingly aware of the intrinsic difficulties and limitations they're facing, and they start considering that it's now time to develop what we would call a deeper overall understanding in a way which is trying to expand or broaden up the baseline of the way we operate and the way we collaborate together. At the origin of this initiative to develop the Center for Origin and Prevalence of Life at ETH lies the conviction that to properly address the question of life in the universe, we need essentially to deal with its interdisciplinary challenges. And we need to create functional bridges with other fields. The center we are establishing today is a practical proposition to implement such a program. We believe that if the different disciplines looking from different perspectives can creatively operate together, they will be filling in the critical knowledge or new knowledge sitting in boundaries, like Joël was mentioning, to enable a better exploitations of opportunities. It's well known that low-hanging fruits often lies in explore boundaries of territory just on the side of the main road that everybody is taking. So 41 ETH professors are forming the core community of researchers of this center. I must admit, this is a unique group of people in terms of individual scientific leaderships, as well as access to state-of-the-art equipment, experimental facility. I'm absolutely convinced that collectively, the breadth of topic we cover at ETH is rather exceptional. Astrophysics, physics, chemistry, biochemistry, microbiology, biology, and environmental science, system sciences. I'm convinced that this center, by its own nature and construction, will be at the vanguard. It will be attractive, definitely, to the young and growing community of researchers interested in fundamental research at the frontier of traditional disciplines. It will enable to establish a new teaching curriculum. It will also be a formidable vehicle for disseminating cutting-edge discoveries to a broad audience fascinated, like Anna, by the topic of life in the universe. The two main functions of the center are with us rather simple, and they will be first to support science activity by allocating research fund to establish joint project, as well as to offer fellowship to attract both high-profile independent researcher and PhD student. And second, the center will have the task to operate an ambitious interdisciplinary seminar and networking program to create optimum conditions for cross-fertilizations, as well as to establish an exciting new teaching curriculum. For the next 6 years, the center will operate with a budget of 9 million Swiss francs. 1/3 of the support comes from its member. 1/3 is financed by funds from the executive board of ETH, and 1/3 by a generous allocation from the NOMIS foundations to establish what is now called the NOMIS ETH Fellowship Program. I'd like to use this opportunity to thank the executive board, Professor Meuseau and his team, and all my ETH colleagues contributing for their enthusiasm, support, and response to that program. And I'm delighted to acknowledge the strong interest and trust and generous support by the NOMIS Foundation in our program. Thank you. Research activities conducted at ETH will address chemical and physical processes leading to living organisms, as well as the conditions a planet should meet to make life possible, and then the feedback that life has on the planet. We will address how practically can we detect life on other planets, exoplanets, and whether there are other forms of life that could exist and could be imagined. Let's be honest and face it. It's a broad and extremely ambitious agenda. But on the other hand, it's aligned with similar work conducted by our colleagues elsewhere. Some of them are here this week at the LATSIS Symposium, from other prestigious research and teaching institutions. I can name Cambridge, Harvard, but I can keep going like that, a couple of others. In that respect, I think that collectively, as a global community, we will establish what I do call a legacy that is not going to enable new knowledge to be collected, but also we will be cultivating a new generation of researchers here that will become increasingly familiar to operate in a more flexible and interdisciplinary environment. And I'm deeply convinced that the world of today is so complicated that it is really something that is needed. In a sense, it's a bit of a strategical vision to establish. It was mentioned by Joël, he called that a vague pathway that eventually, whether it will be in a lifetime or Sasha or not, have a good doctor, leave the whale on, I believe, one of the greatest mysteries of the universe. Now, enough about generality and concept and program and vision. I would like to invite you to be a bit more explicit and to get a bit more detail on this famous research activity that will be conducted at ETH. And for that, it's my pleasure to hand over the floor to my colleagues that are going to expand further on some specific program that they are leading and how they will benefit from this fresh and new center. So thank you very much, Kara. It's all yours.
Okay. So thank you, Didier, Joël, and Anna for the nice introduction to the center, and thank you everyone for joining. As I mentioned, I have been tasked to tell you a bit about some of my research and how I see the research in the center and what's getting me really excited about the coming years. And so, as you can see by my title, it's geobiology, which has the word geo for geology and biology, right? And so this is the interaction between Earth and life. And in particular, what I'm tasked with in my research is to study the evolution of our planet. And the evolution of our planet is not just chemical, it's not just physical, it's also biological. And what we strive to understand is this total process of what happened throughout our planet's history and then the evolution of the planet as a whole. And so, more specifically, how we can address this, of course, there's many points in Earth history where there's some very key interactions between the living and the non-living Earth, but perhaps the most exciting and pertinent question is what happened on our planet where we switched from a non-living planetary body into a living planet. And so this is a core question, a fundamental question within my field that we try to address. And how we address this is by going to places on our planet where you can actually see this transition. So where on Earth can we go and see life operating? And at what point do we no longer see a living system? This can be a very high temperature, something deep underground, something very, very cold, very, very high pressure. So there's all of these different physical conditions on our planet that you can go and study and look at and characterize what goes on at the limit of life and why is there this transition. And so this work that I do is largely about characterizing local systems, about what is the chemistry, physical conditions of these systems, how did they form, why are they there, what are the organisms doing there, and when do they stop appearing, why does life start ceasing to exist. And while we can look at this locally, as an individual group and as a community of geobiologists, when we want to ask the bigger question on a planetary scale, when does life start or stop? How did life start or stop on our planet and on other planetary bodies? We need to have other disciplines come in and help us out. And this is exactly why I think the center is so great, because I can look here on Earth and kind of disentangle locally what are the processes operating at these limits of life. But we need Earth scientists to tell us, within my department, helping me know more about the conditions of Earth, early Earth, how our planet formed, how other planets formed. We need chemists telling us about what's going on at this atomic level and how that is actually influencing these systems and actually driving life. And we also need biologists and ecologists helping us better understand how living systems operate, what their strategies are in order to survive and evolve. And we need physicists to tell us more about what else is out there and what those conditions might be. And by working together, I think all of us will be able to make an advancement in this in this question of, what is living, what is non-living, what leads to these transitions, and how do we get an evolving, the evolution of life. And so with this, I think those are my general words on what the research is, why I'm excited, and I'm so glad that we have such a great group of colleagues that are excited and ready to take on this challenge with me. And I'm also excited to help them answer their specific questions within their disciplines as well. And so with that, I will pass it to Sasha to tell a bit more about his work. Thank you.
So many excited people in the room. So let me add one myself. I'm truly excited about the center, and I would like to thank all of my colleagues for already making this happen. It's an amazing opportunity. I think the time is indeed ripe. So let's take on the challenge and make it happen. As you have heard, my goal is to find life outside the solar system. And yes, it's going to be a big challenge. I have 25 years to do that, as we have just heard. But let me walk you through this a little bit and why I believe this is not unrealistic. There's no guarantee for success, but on the way we're going to learn a lot of things. As Rael was mentioning, there's a lot to learn left and right along this process. So obviously it all started in 1995 when Didier, my colleague here, and his PhD advisor, Michel Mayor, discovered the first planet outside our solar system. And today, more than 5,000 of these exoplanets are known, and we keep discovering them basically on a day-by-day basis. What we've learned so far is that statistically, each star hosts a planet. And most of these planets, or a lot of these planets, they have sizes similar to Earth, and very many of them, they are the separation from the stars, where the energy they receive from the stars is very similar to what the Earth receives from the sun. What we do not know, however, is if these terrestrial-type planets have atmospheres, and what these atmospheres are made of, and if some of these planets can provide conditions for life as we know it to exist. So today, Earth is the only place in the universe where life is thriving, and this has to be challenged. So how can we detect and investigate the atmospheres of these planets? We need an observational approach that allows us to take pictures of these planets, a direct photo, if you wish. And to do that, we need to develop new instruments and also new telescopes. And this is the focus of our research group. So on the one hand, our group plays a significant role in an international consortium that builds an instrument for the world's largest ground-based telescope, the Extremely Large Telescope, or short ELT. The ELT will feature a 39-meter primary mirror. Just for reference, the James Webb Telescope has only 6.5 meter. And this beautiful ELT is currently under construction in the Atacama Desert, and it will hopefully become operational towards the end of this decade. A primary goal of the instrument we're involved in is to take the first picture of a terrestrial planet, potentially similar to Earth, around one of the very nearest stars. But our long-term vision is to do that not only for a few stars, but for dozens of stars. And we would like to investigate the atmospheres of dozens of terrestrial exoplanets. And this requires, however, a dedicated and optimized space mission, because the perturbing effects of our own atmosphere puts a limit as to what we can achieve from the ground, even with the ELT. And in this context, we are leading an international initiative that develops the scientific context and a technological roadmap for a large space mission that can achieve this. Our work has already been recognized by the European Space Agency as a scientific topic. The detection, characterization of terrestrial exoplanets is considered as a candidate for a future large mission within the ESA science program. But what exactly would we be looking for? Life on Earth has changed the face of our home planet, on land, on water, and it also changed the composition of the atmosphere. For instance, the atmosphere contains significant amounts of oxygen, as we are breathing right now, and that oxygen is constantly replenished and produced by the plants, by life on our planet, and by algae. So now when we observe the Earth from the outside, we can see this oxygen imprinted, because the oxygen absorbs light that is emitted from the Earth, so this light is blocked, and it will not receive any detector that is outside of Earth. It's like the greenhouse effect, like CO2 or water absorbing radiation from the Earth, and it cannot escape into space. And now we can apply exactly the same technique. We can point telescopes, powerful telescopes, to distant planets and look for missing radiation. And that missing radiation could be indications of certain molecules, like oxygen, being present in the atmosphere of those planets. That's our approach. So the new Center for Origin and Prevalence of Life plays a central role in that context, because first, gaining a deeper understanding about the plausible building blocks of life, the pathways, the timescales of chemical reactions, and the external conditions when life arose on early Earth will help us to prioritize targets. Which stars and which planets are the best targets to look for life outside of Earth? Second, we need to better understand which atmospheric gases are very good biotracers. Maybe there's something else than oxygen, methane, and we need to work together to find the best molecules and also the timescales when and how they can accumulate in the atmospheres of these planets. And finally, and this is very, very important, we need to verify to what extent they are true bioindicators. Maybe there's other processes that can lead to the creation of these gases in these atmospheres, so we need to be able to rule out what we call a false positive. We need to be able to be sure that what we see is indeed of biological origins. And addressing these points is beyond the realm of astrophysics. It requires a collaboration across very many disciplines, including chemistry, biology, earth, and atmospheric sciences. And enabling such interdisciplinary research is at the core of the new center. For the exoplanet community, they are crucial for the design of future missions, of future instruments, and for the interpretation of the data, they're equally valuable. And finally, I believe, ultimately, working together will allow us to empirically assess if some of the terrestrial planets out there show indeed indications of biological activity outside the solar system within the next 25 years. And with this, I hand over to Anna again, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joel. Thank you very much, Didier. Thank you very much, Sasha. Thank you very much, Kara, for these amazing talks. I enjoyed it a lot, even though I've talked to you the last days. It's always just so interesting, at least in my point of view. Let me just tell you one little story before we come to the Q&A sessions. Like 2 days ago, we've been to a reception of the LATSI Symposium, which takes place right now about this topic, origin and prevalence of life. And we've talked like to really amazing researchers from all around the world, from Cambridge, from Harvard, from MIT, and what all of them said, that they're like really excited about the collaboration they can do with us now. Even though they are centers already, they can't wait to collaborate. And by the way, the journalists who are sitting here, you find on the USB stick on your seats the video. We made some quotes, not about how they're excited about our center, but about like really content stuff, what were the most important findings in their eyes in the last years and what they expect in the next years. And all the others gonna find this video this afternoon on YouTube. So, but now we're gonna come to the Q&A session, and besides the reference, besides which you heard just now, it's also Roland Rick, who is also in the management team. He's gonna focus on the chemical processes during the emergence of life. He's gonna be also in the Q&A sessions. Yeah, first I'm gonna welcome Roland Rick, Sascha Quanz, Kara Manja-Bosco, Didier Queloz, of course, and Joel Möser, of course. And I think we should start first with the questions in here. So if some of the journalists here have a question, just put your arms in the air, and then Marian, we're gonna come with a microphone to you and say first your name and your medium, and then your question, and if you want, to whom it might be supposed to. You can do it in English, French, Italian. And
German,
yeah.
and Spanish.
German, of course. Yeah, German is welcome as well. So, does anyone in here has a question, or was it so clear? Like,
Don't be shy.
don't be shy. Oh, Ariane Gigon from La Liberté. You don't have to say that.
Yeah, thank you. Did I understand that correctly? This new telescope or new instrument will be ready by the end of the decade. So can you tell us about more what are the challenges to solve till the end of the decade? It's 8 years or maybe more?
Yes, I'm very happy to do that. So the telescope, the ground-based telescope I was referring to, this extremely large telescope, the ELT, is being built by the European Southern Observatory. It's a European collaboration of countries that are currently operating another observatory in Chile already, the Very Large Telescope Array. And 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, it was realized that the next step for ground-based astronomy is to build bigger mirrors, bigger ground-based telescopes. And that's the result. It's an international collaboration. Switzerland is a member state of the European Southern Observatory, so we are a partner. And that allows us also to participate in building of the instruments. So it's two separate things. You need a telescope, and then you need a camera or a spectrograph that you attach to the telescope in order to do your observations. And at the moment, there's 3 instruments that are considered the first generation, the first ones that's going to be put onto the ELT, and we are strongly involved in one of them. I'm the project scientist for this instrument, and my colleague in my group is the lead systems engineer responsible for the overall integration of this instrument. So now when I say this instrument and the telescope are going to be ready by the end of this decade, this is the current plan.
Right? Maybe you can, Didier.
Yeah, maybe. I think Sasha is too modest. Because right now, you all know there is a telescope called the James Webb Space Telescope.
Fair enough.
It was not designed to detect really molecules on planet, but it will be detecting molecules, and your team is on it as well. So maybe you can mention this is happening today. And I keep telling when I get this question, Sasha planning for 25 years because he can. But surprise can come tomorrow. So there's really a couple of equipment right now, and especially your team is working. So I think you should talk about James Webb.
I can mention this also briefly. The question was specific on ELT, but this is a very good connection because the James Webb Space Telescope, and as Didier was saying, our group was also involved in hardware contribution to the European instrument, the MIRI instrument. For me, this is a logical connection. We have a great telescope right now in space, and we're going to build the greatest telescope on Earth until hopefully the end of this decade, depending on crisis and so on and so on. But in the end of the day, I was trying to motivate, we need to combine these things. We need to combine space-based observations with a giant telescope. And this requires a new generation of space observatories. So this is a logical connection where we start with James Webb right now. We learn how to build huge telescopes on the ground, and eventually those things have to be combined to find many of these small terrestrial exoplanets out there.
And I can maybe add something. Switzerland has really started a serious and ambitious capabilities in the space program. We have CHEOPS, which is a very small telescope. It is not going to detect life, but it has brought the community and the various institutions to work together. And I think if you include CHEOPS right now on the map, I think even for a country that looks small, I think the ambition to be a key player into a big space mission are really realistic right now. So we should not be shy. We should just stand up and say, yes, we can do it, so let's do it.
There was a question on the back. It's you.
It's Christian Speicher from the Neue Zürcher Zeitung NZZ.
Hello. I want to ask, you said that you have money for 6 years right now, and even an optimistic estimate is that it will take 25 years to find life. So is there the idea for how long do you plan for this center? Will there be a follow-up program after these 6 years, or do you have a perspective for the future?
Okay, well, there's nothing strange to define milestone in such a program. So it's very classic to define a timescale for an amount of money. It doesn't prevent other source of money or the money to be continued. So it's not against the continuation of the center. It's just this is a secure amount that we have. And 6 years is pretty long already. Usually people are talking for 3-4 years. So I think it's ready, it shows the ambitions. Now there comes a time scale that we have in the document that we've been talking about to establish the center is we do believe that up to at 10 years, with 10 years, we can demonstrate that something will happen. And the reason 10 years is very simple. I think the time for PhD students will be 4 years. Fellowship program will need 2 or 3 fellowships in a row. So the typical time scale, 5-10 years, is nothing extravagant. No, even 10 years for science is a short time scale. And the ambition is really to have the center embedded into the ETH, and I think the ETH will continue after 10 years, so I have no doubt about that. I'm pretty sure if we get successful, it will naturally continue. But maybe Joël wants to say.
Yes, no, you summarized very well. So this is what we intend with the centers, is to launch new initiatives, and we always start with a first phase. Just don't forget, we started just a year ago, and we have raised, these 9 million, which is fast. And then, during these next years, we'll continue to do fundraising, to collaborate with other organizations, and so on. And so that will, I have no doubt that we will get the funding for the next 10 years. I have no doubt. But what is the end goal? The end goal, if this center is a success and proves itself, then this is something that can be absorbed into the organization. And that gives the way to work together between the departments. So we have a few initiatives along this line. I just want to mention something. It was so clear when Sasha talked about all the projects he was involved in. This is representative of these 40 professors that we have. They are all top experts in their field. So we start with a very, very good base. And to bring, you told me once, the most difficult is to find a common language. With the biologists, you told me that's the most difficult. I have the same problem. So now we have different departments that allow to find a common language, to address the issues together. And this is a very, very big step. Further questions?
Roman, are there some questions online? No questions there because it was so clear. I don't know. Maybe
now Christian has a further one.
Maybe you can explain what you want to do concretely to have this exchange between the different departments. What are you doing that they don't just keep on working as they did before? So what are the structures you are looking for to have this new kind of exchange?
Okay, so you point to actually the core of the activity. The success of the center will be exactly to address this very point. Otherwise, people keep doing what they were doing, they just use the money, and it's very classical. In our cases, we're going to add some soft boundary condition, or if you see it the other way, some teaser. So if they want to develop a program, they will have some minimum conditions, like your program maybe should be done with another professor in another department. And in a way that if you do not demonstrate that what you're doing has a direct relevance or impact, or you don't establish a joint activity related between two professors. It doesn't have to be strictly between two departments, but the idea is to demonstrate you're not operating alone here. And it can be done in many different ways. It's just a matter of finding the right incentive. Bear in mind that we don't have that much resource to do that compared to the running budget. The running budget of ETH was mentioned. So you compare with the running budget of ETH, it's a small amount. But we can just steer the path or the direction of what people are doing a little bit. And that's really what it is. I mean, don't expect a dramatic move at 90 degrees. The science doesn't work like that. You will gradually steer the people a little bit off track, because they will never make a big step. They will be out of the comfort zone, they will be out of the competence zone, and it's not going to work. So they will have to maintain the core expertise they have, but we're going to help them to get a little bit aside. And a typical professor has typically 4, 5, 6 PhD here. Well, they will have a possibility here maybe to add one more that could be shared with another professor, and that could be a mechanism. It's one of the many mechanisms. The other element, which is essential, we will have a very intensive, and that's one of the job of Cara, of what we call seminar, networking. We call that one-on-one sessions. We just teach to each other what we're doing. So what has happened this week, we want to implement on a weekly basis. It means we will have a social space where people will meet. Because of the location of the two sites, Angerberg and then downtown Zurich, we will have two spaces that will be shared, that will be organized, one in the Earth Science department and the other one in one of the buildings in HAT in Angerberg. And all this will help. So it will not come for free. We will have to just push a little bit, and I have great expectation also of the new blood coming, of the fellowship program. That will be people that will be selected on the fact that they will be working at the interface. And they will be pesting in a positive way the professor to just do something with maybe the other one next door they never considered doing. And that's a trick also we're going to use. It will be a bit of a tensioning process between a teaser and then a boundary condition. But you're right, that is where we are going to gauge the success of the center, is how far we will be achieving this.
If I may add, so we have a series of initiatives along this line. We call them the ETH Plus projects, where the condition was to have at least two departments working together. Didier was very careful and said soft conditions. If you need harder, you just come to me, I can do that. And that's more of a joke. But the second point is, I mentioned we will be hiring additional professors. And these professors will be hiring from the beginning at the interdisciplinary, at the border between disciplines. And we have quite a few of them already in other fields. I'm thinking between the social science and the hard sciences we have.
We have a question online. Roman, what is the question?
So, yeah, the question comes from Marc-André Misere from Swiss Info. And he would like to know, the James Webb Telescope has already found CO2 in the atmosphere of a hot Jupiter and delivered its first pictures of an exoplanet. Did you expect this so quickly? And then he adds, and does it mean maybe James Webb Telescope will work more on exoplanets?
Okay, I heard you take this. There were three questions. So let's do it one by one. Maybe let's step back a bit. So the James Webb Space Telescope was not built to do exoplanet science, but it had a very different mission. It was supposed to find the first stars in the universe. But during this development process, exoplanet really took off, and people realized that this fantastic space telescope can also be used to do fantastic exoplanet science. And as a result, a significant fraction of the observing time is already today allocated to exoplanet science, and I indeed expect this share to continue to increase as the mission continues. Now, the first detection of CO2 in the atmosphere of a hot Jupiter, that was a result that came from one of these early science release data programs. That was programs that specifically targeted high-profile targets to get some exciting results very early on so that people can see what James Webb can do, and that more ideas and more observing time or new searches can be started. It is indeed the first detection of this molecule in an atmosphere of a hot Jupiter. It is not too surprising that it is there, but it's good to know. You always have to keep in mind you have a certain expectation, you have models, but you need empirical data to really prove or disprove certain assumptions. And in that context, this first detection of CO2 in the atmosphere is very important. Just for those of you who are not sure what a hot Jupiter is, it's a gas giant planet like Jupiter, but on a very short orbit. So the orbit is a few days only, and not 11 years as the Jupiter in our solar system. Then the direct detection of exoplanets, we were actually involved in the study. There was a press release by NASA yesterday. Also, this was to be expected in the sense that we picked this target deliberately to showcase what James Webb can do for the direct detection of exoplanets. But again, it's a very special system. It's also a gas giant planet, but very far away from the star, because this is what James Webb can do in terms of taking the picture of a planet. We will not get to the small planets. James Webb is not powerful to do that. So this is not too surprising. And I forgot the third question. Can you repeat it, please? Oh God. Well, there was one more point. I don't.
The third.
Does it mean maybe
yeah.
Webb will work more on exoplanets?
I think so. Yes, I think so. These results were so exciting that I think more people are encouraged to use James Webb for exoplanet science. Yes.
And I may add, okay.
You may add with the microphone. Yeah.
So, Bruno Knellwolf from CH Media would like to know, how is the center involved in the work of James Webb Telescope? How can the center use the results of the telescope?
Yes, as we were saying, there was a Swiss contribution to the James Webb Space Telescope, and that contribution on the hardware side allows us also to participate in the guaranteed time observation of this observatory. So part of the observing time is given to the teams who develop the instruments so that they can benefit from the telescope. So our group is involved in this program and we can exploit this. And for us, it is two things are important. One is it strengthens international collaborations on the astrophysics side, because these are indeed international teams that worked on these projects and on these instruments. And the second is that by having a new observatory in space, we learn more about how to do observations. There was a huge development in terms of technology to get James Webb up and flying. I wanted to say up and running, but it's actually up and flying. And as I tried to explain, having that technology development already done, now putting this together with the development on the ground will help us tremendously to understand what needs to be done for the future large missions.
I wanted to ask something on the question that you raised, Christian, on how multidisciplinary. We talked about research, but there is a part on education that will be developed through the different departments, and the impact of this can be huge. Maybe Helma, you want to say a few words about this? I don't know.
So, I mean,
maybe
I'm in the chemistry department, and we have the N-Studiengang, the interdisciplinary students. So they take chemistry and biology with the chemist students and the biology students, or with the physics students, they take physics, and with the chemist students. So they're very deep, as you mentioned at the beginning. So it's a very important thing that we go deep, but they do that on 2 rows. It's a challenging Studiengang, and we are thinking that we actually start there, right? That we may have a master dedicated to that, and these students can actually put things individually together. We have already students who are interested in origin and prevalence of life, and I meet them, all the students, to put together their curriculum, and they select. One is at your place now, he was at my place, also doing experimental work, and he's planning to go to your place. So that starts, and I think this is one of the exciting things. We have a fundamental question, not an applied one, which is also important, but now here a fundamental question, and you should show the students that there are so many questions, and that excites them too, and it nourishes them to really be excited about science and contribution to humanity at the end.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have to come to an end to the Q&A session. You can always...
Kara had not a chance to answer a question, so I want to ask you to tell the story about the PCR stuff, PCR test, that once you told me about.
Oh.
Because something I'm fascinated as a scientist, as a president, is what I said. On the pathway, we make discoveries that are useful for something completely different that we don't expect. And all of us have experienced this. But you mentioned me, and I don't want to tell the story because I tell it wrong every time. So you are the expert.
So this story here, Joel had asked me about, is there examples in fundamental science and how it's, led to some greater contribution. And my favorite example, one of the inspirations of why I study what I do is something I learned as an undergrad, which is there was a geobiologist or environmental microbiologist, as you will, named Thomas Brock, who had gone to Yellowstone one summer and seen these very, very hot pools bubbling. And on the effluent, or the exit of them, he was noticing that it looked like there might be life, and he wondered if deep inside these pools, if there could actually also be life living where the temperature is extremely high. And so through this fundamental question, wondering, how hot can an organism live, he went and investigated these very pools and found that, yes, in fact, there are organisms living at temperatures, 70 degrees or more, in these pools of water. And this was a very just fundamental question: how far can life live? Can I actually get the organisms that are living at these elevated temperatures into culture to look and study how they operate? And through biochemists noticed this work going on and thought, well, this is a very challenging problem. If you are living at a high temperature, your DNA will denature, right? We have a double helix. You might have trouble actually, holding together or doing replication. And there was a big problem with this task of replicating DNA rapidly called PCR, where they wanted to what they call denature the DNA, so split the DNA into 2 strands, and then replicate it. And most polymerases were failing because they were denaturing or becoming non-functional, not operating at this elevated temperature. And the biochemists thought, well, that organism that can live at these high temperatures must have some polymerase that is capable of operating at this temperature. And that was this protein that they then isolated called Taq polymerase, which is the key component of all PCR reactions today. And of course, now we all are very familiar with what PCR is, because we all have this rapid PCR test going on with the corona pandemic. And so this, I think, is a very nice example of how, just some fundamental question: can life live at these high temperatures? Some person from another discipline, oh, I have a problem, I think that might actually have a solution, can lead to technological advances that are making all of this revolution in molecular biology happen. So
thank you, Cara, for sharing this. For me, the moment was, we were starting this in the middle of COVID, and suddenly you have a research that was looking for life in extreme conditions, so related to origin of life and prevalence of life, and it related to the PCR test. I said, what's incredible story, right? So I want to share this story.
Thank you very much for sharing this story. And now we really have to come at an end, because I promised the journalists who are in here that they're gonna have the opportunity for individual interviews with all of you, but actually not just all of you. There are also 3 other professors in here who are gonna join this center. This is Paolo Sossi, who's gonna focus on the atmosphere on exoplanets and how the atmosphere was on Earth when life emerged. He combines simulations in his lab with results from the James Webb Telescope. And Helmer Welmers, who's gonna concentrate on the chemical processes during the emergence of life. And Loïc Pellissier, who's gonna find out how does life change planets and how do planets change life. So if some of you want to have interviews also with these 3 professors, or of course also with Joel, Didier, Cara, Sasha, or Roland, just come over to me. And the ones who are watching from home, you can ask all questions also via email, mediarelations@eth.ethz.ch. And if you want to have an interview as well, write us. We are more than happy to organize it for you. Maybe not today, but very soon. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for the great talks, the questions, and all the people who helped to make this event possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.